67% of strategies that are well formulated actually fail. Why? It's not because they don't have the right team members. It fails because of poor execution. I have found that when there is more than one person accountable for the same deliverable, it creates confusion.
Today we are going to explore why even the most capable organizations often underperform and how to really identify the hidden operational risks that undermine growth.
Admitting when something feels off is so important. So asking the tough questions, whether or not the scaling initiative still makes sense, are we still delivering what we intended to solve?
Hi everyone, this is Maheen. Welcome to the She and Success podcast powered by She and Success Business Magazine, a platform dedicated to spotlighting the voices, strategies, and journeys of women leaders and entrepreneurs who are shaping Canada's business and policy landscape. Now, today we are going to explore why even the most capable organizations they often underperform and how to really identify the hidden operational risks that undermine growth. In 2026, scaling a business requires more than just a great product. It requires the operational discipline and leadership alignment to really ensure that execution keeps pace with ambition. Joining us today is Charlene Currie, the president of MOR Consulting Group. Charlene is a powerhouse turnaround leader with over 20 years of experience advising Fortune 500 companies and public institutions. An Ivy Executive MBA and PMP certified expert, she is a sought-after keynote speaker, recently featured in Forbes and Canadian HR Reporter for her insights on talent management. She specializes in fixing what's broken and scaling what works. Lots to uncover and unpack in this episode today. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Charlene. Charlene, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Maheen, I am fabulous, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Very pleased to have you with us, Charlene. Now, Charlene, let's begin our segment by understanding the underperformance trap, right? You often work with teams that are objectively capable, but they still find themselves failing to meet the targets or underperforming. Thus, why do capable organizations underperform, and what do leaders often miss when scaling or transforming their organizations?
I've seen this happen with organizations of all sizes, Maheen. I've seen it happen with small organizations, medium organizations, but also Fortune 500 companies. And all of them have the same root cause. And really, it's poor execution. So what do I mean by that? Let's start with the data. 67%, according to Harvard Business Review, 67% of strategies that are well formulated actually fail. Why? It's not because they don't necessarily have the right team members, and it's certainly not because the strategy isn't well formulated or baked out. It fails because of poor execution. So when we take a step back and peel back the onion and better understand, what do I mean by poor execution? Well, it's not that the team doesn't necessarily understand the strategic vision or the mission. That is clear. But what likely is unclear is, what problem are we solving for? And why are we solving it? What are the milestones that we actually intend to achieve? What does success look like? When are we expected to actually complete activities? What's the expectation in terms of what we're completing today, by the end of the week, by the end of the month, and even by the end of the quarter? Sometimes we get so busy just focusing on progress and activity that we miss the strategic objective and the problem that we're solving for. And that creates a lot of unclear understanding of what it is we're delivering and why. So I would say focusing always on what problem you're solving and what does that mean, not only to our employees, but the customer, and focusing on the benefit realization that the strategic initiative is supposed to provide is actually going to be the difference between a failed initiative and also a successful one.
Well, it's such a vital insight that talent alone isn't enough if the underlying structure doesn't really support clear execution. Now, Charlene, let's cover the hidden operational risks that surface as growth outpaces the structure. What hidden scaling mistakes create crisis for growing businesses?
So, Maheen, very often the hidden mistake is having an unclear plan. So, Project Management Institute, PMI, has actually done a study that indicates that for every dollar spent in an organization, that 10 cents of it is attributed to waste. So that means that because of the strategic initiative having project drift, or what's other words known as scope creep, where things are being added that weren't actually intended to be in the original plan, just like that, 10% of it is evaporated. And when you think about what that means for a small business, if a small business is scaling and trying to grow and they've invested $500,000, hypothetically speaking, into scaling and growing, that actually translates to 10% of that 500,000, $50,000 gone just like that. And that potentially could either pay for a full FTE depending on the role, or potentially pay for, a partial employee. But I will say this, to correct this, to not fall in this trap, a company needs to take a look internally and externally. Internally, understanding what are their strengths? What are they better at that no other competitor can do better than them? Taking a look at their weaknesses and being critically honest and transparent about what they are. I know a lot of the times when we step into firms, companies are saying, or people are saying, you know what, we're great at everything, but that is not necessarily true. So thinking about what it is that perhaps you do not do well as an organization, and saying, that's not how we compete, and here's why. There's also the opportunity. So understanding what opportunities exist. Maybe the strategic initiative is being implemented because there's an additional market that could be seized, that there's additional customers that can be acquired, that potentially there's a particular product that you can either deliver or create that will solve a gap within the market. And then the other thing is understanding the trade-offs. And I will say that most organizations, when they start a strategic initiative, they're taking a look and really having a very optimistic approach, not thinking about what potentially could go wrong, but understanding very clear and very upfront, what could go wrong, and understanding the trade-offs that you're willing to make in order to deliver this initiative is going to make a difference in your success. You can avoid the crisis, or you can avoid the crisis or the chaos. If you take a look at, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, as an organization, you wanted to deliver a minimum viable product that was like 80%. But then you take a look and you say, you know what? Because of these risks that were introduced, we have to deliver at 60%, and 60% will be good enough because it will provide these features. Or you may identify that you may have a resourcing challenge and you may need to add additional resources to make the timeline. But understanding that your costs may go up, but you're still going to have benefit realization that makes the company successful, whatever that means. So taking a look at what trade-offs you're willing to make is going to avoid any hidden surprises toward the end, where potentially you're realizing that you don't have the product that you intended to have, or avoiding the challenge where your profit and loss, your revenue isn't meeting the expectation that you originally intended.
Oh, catching these friction points, and thank you for highlighting those in the first place, Charlene. It early is quite the difference between a resilient organization and the one that loses control under lots of pressure. Next up, let's explore why discipline and accountability must evolve with the speed of growth. Tell us, why is accountability so hard to implement, and how does structure affect results?
In terms of accountability, that's a hard nut to crack, and I'll tell you why. Because most companies actually identify that accountability is instrumental in their HR playbook, that it's something that their culture is built upon. However, most companies don't necessarily get that accountability factor right. Why is that? I have found that when there is more than one person accountable for the same deliverable, that it creates confusion. There has to be one person accountable, and there has to be very clear roles and responsibilities, identifying who is the decision maker, who is responsible for doing the deliverable. And if you have more than one person responsible, Maheen, identifying who is delivering what and what does that item look like, that deliverable, and understanding what does good look like, because you can ask one of your team members to deliver a particular item, but if they don't have a clear understanding of what's expected of them and what success looks like, that's actually creating an opportunity for there to be failure, right? And I would say even the simple things such as decision rights, for something to go particularly well, employees and team members need to understand, Maheen, what decisions are within their control. What can they do within their realm of responsibility? I have found that co-leads don't work. There needs to be one person accountable, one person who actually makes the decision, and very clear understanding of who's doing what does success look like, and when is the deliverable required to be completed.
Well, real accountability isn't really about the blame, as you rightfully said, Charlene. It's really about creating that structural clarity that allows everyone to succeed in their role. To the entrepreneurs watching, in 2026, you cannot scale a business on familiarity alone. If your succession decisions and leadership structure are based on who is most visible rather than who's most ready, then you're building a house of cards. Look for the quiet leaders in your organization, the ones who are already leading without permissions, and give them the ownership that they deserve today, or watch them take their stabilizing course to your competitor tomorrow.
At Purolator, we understand the importance of every delivery, whether it's a document, a special gift, a critical healthcare shipment, or an entire warehouse worth of inventory. Throughout our more than 60-year history, we've honed our expertise to build out a powerful portfolio of logistics services that enable us to deliver on every promise. Whether shipping across town or around the globe, from small and medium-sized businesses to industrial, technology, retail, and healthcare sectors, Purolator serves a diverse array of customers. So no matter what, where, or when you're shipping, Purolator's expertise, experience, and innovative solutions enable us to deliver on your promises.
Now let's examine how identifying overlooked talent strengthens long-term strategy and results. How can organizations really remove this bias to identify true leadership readiness?
You know, there are a lot of things in play that come along with identifying true leadership readiness. And I would say that we have a thought leadership piece called The Dangerous Myth of Succession Planning.
Right.
Now, in that thought leadership piece, we actually explore whether or not high potential is actually considered to be true high potential, or if high potential sometimes translates to, you know, a high visibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially where we are today with, some organizations being hybrid, some organizations having remote workers, it's so important to evaluate talent, not only based on their competency, but making sure that the workforce understands how talent is evaluated. So there's the perception of equitability and fairness.
Right.
So I always say that with identifying talent, the first step isn't just assessing your team. It's actually assessing your strategy, understanding what it is your company is working towards, what the goals are and the objectives, doing an assessment on your team, and understanding whether or not your team has the skill sets to carry forward those defined objectives.
Right.
A lot of the times companies start the opposite way. They say, who do we have? And what do we feel like we need? But if you take a look at your strategy, what it is you need to actually get over the finish line, and then reverse engineer and take a look at, well, if we want to do X, we need these skill sets, and here's what we have within our workforce, you quickly identify the gaps. And I would likely argue that you can actually have efficiency in terms of your workforce because you're hiring exactly what you need and not necessarily hiring additional people based on an assumption.
Right.
I would also like to add that when there's that perception of fairness, when employees believe that they can get promoted if they work hard, you're going to have an increased amount of talent, but also potentially be recognized as the employer of choice.
Absolutely. And this is such a good overview into understanding the objectives behind talent evaluation. And you're right. I mean, shifting the focus towards objective readiness ensures that, our leadership pipeline is filled with the most effective rather than the most visible talent. So thank you for highlighting that, Charlene. Next up, let's discuss why rising complexity in 2026 is increasing the demand for practical leadership execution. Please tell us, what Fortune 500 lesson can small businesses apply to improve their execution?
Oh, having clear processes, hands down. So as a small business, if growth is inevitable, right? It's something that small businesses want to do. They want to grow. They want to get bigger. But whether you're a solopreneur or you're trying to grow into a large, corporation, every time you add an employee, Maheen, you are actually adding complexity. Right. So having processes that are well documented, but also repeatable and scalable, extremely important. Why? Because you want, no matter who is stepping into your organization, that you can cross-skill them, that you can give them an opportunity to do different things to maximize their productivity. You want to give them the ability to be able to step in with their best foot forward and to get up to speed very quickly. And when you have well-documented processes that are simple and easy to understand, and folks understand what they need to do and what is the output, you make your business so much better. But also important, that I would argue, would also be making sure that you have an escalation protocol, because like I said before, things will go wrong. And as a leader, you want to understand when things go wrong, you want to know immediately, and you want to know from your team. You don't want to know from your customer. You certainly don't want to know from a regulator. And worse, you don't want to know from, some type of, regulatory infraction that's occurring.
Right. And applying the big firm discipline to really the small firm agility is the ultimate competitive advantage for any growing SME that is out there. But this was a great conversation with you, Charlene. Thank you so much for walking us through how important it is to take that control back for SMEs. Now that we wrap up, if there's one piece of advice for a CEO that is really losing control while scaling, what would that be?
I've sat in a room with executives who have been scaling fast and have felt a little bit of anxiety. So I will say this: if you're a CEO and you are scaling and you feel a sense of trepidation, a little sense of nerves or anxiousness, chances are your team is feeling it worse. That is the prime opportunity to open up the lines of communication, to make sure that you're having conversations, and not necessarily formalized, by the way, anecdotal ones. There's a real opportunity to not only speak to your leaders, but actually speak to the people on the ground. Have a clear understanding and be honest, because I know as leaders, we're expected to have the answers, but admitting when something feels off or when you don't is so important. So the conversation could go something like this. I am feeling that things may not be going as planned, or it may be a sense of chaos that is occurring. And I want to get a sense of if you're feeling the same, or if there's some other feelings that you could be experiencing. By asking that very simple question, it opens up the lines of communications for you to actually understand what's happening on the ground. And it may surprise you. I would also say never lose sight of not only the employee experience, but also the customer experience. So asking the tough questions, whether or not that the scaling initiative still makes sense. Are we still delivering what we intended to? And are we still solving any problems or capitalizing the opportunity that we initially intended to solve? Breaking down those lines of communication and really keeping a pulse on what's happening both from a customer perspective and employee perspective is really what's going to help with scaling, not only efficiently, but effectively.
That is a great reminder, Charlene, that this is a great reminder to go back to the basics of structure and discipline and really move forward from there. But thank you so much for joining us and for sharing such great expertise and your insights with us.
Thank you.
And listeners, that was Charlene Currie from MOR Consulting Group, a masterclass on why fixing what's broken today is the only way to scale what works tomorrow. Thank you for tuning into the She and Success podcast powered by She and Success Business Magazine. Be sure to subscribe for more expert insights and visit sheandsuccess.ca for resources. A special shout out to our exclusive shipping partner, Pure Leader, for their ongoing commitment to supporting women entrepreneurs and helping them build, grow, and lead successful businesses across Canada.